at the Environment Defense. And I have the pleasure of moderating today's conversation. This is the first public seminar in our new region series. Going forward, the Reset Network will host those seminars quarterly, rotating across regions of the Global South. And we are delighted to have you with us today at what is, in many ways, a defining moment for energy and climate policy in Asia. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the broader 2026 energy shock have reverberated across the world economy, but nowhere more sharply than in Asia. The Philippines has declared a national energy emergency. India is expanding coal to meet summer demand. Shortage of oil, LNG, and even fertilizer imports are, are disrupting the households, workers, and industry across the region. Those pressures arrive on top of a structural challenge. The Global South holds around 75% of the cost-effective opportunity for climate mitigation, yet attract only a fraction of global clean energy investment. The question of what a just transition looks like when the world is in crisis has never felt more urgent or more concrete. The research network, which focuses on solutions for South-led just energy transition, was created precisely to help address challenges like this one. It is newly launched International Research and Engage Network, convened by Environment Defense Fund, and bring together researchers and decision makers across the global south to accelerate just energy transition, tailored to local circumstances. It builds on the network MCET network, which since 2022 has supported open source electricity modeling in countries including China, India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Colombia, Honduras, and Chile, and broaden that foundation to include economic analysis, policy design, and finance pathway. Research does not lobby for any specific transition pathway. It provides impartial, evidence-based analysis to support decision-making, and it does so by mobilizing local researchers and connect them to a global ecosystem of open tool, data, and partners. Today's session is one of the ways that we hope that network can contribute by creating space for researchers and decision makers across Asia to think together in public about how the region is responding to one of the most accurate energy shock in recent memory. We have 60 minutes. I will introduce our three panelists shortly, and then we will move into a moderated discussion of roughly 40 minutes before opening the floor to your questions. Please use the Q&A functions in Zoom to submit questions at any time during the session, and we will get to as many as possible. With that, let me introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Professor Joyashree Roy. She is a distinguished professor at Asian Institute of Technology, AIT, and founder or director of the Smart Center on Global South Transformation. She was coordinating lead author for IPCC Workgroup 3, including AR5, AR6, and part of the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize winner panel. And she brings a pan-Asia multidisciplinary lens with strong grounding in development, energy, and climate. Our second panelist is Professor Duan Maosheng. He is Deputy Director of Qin Hu Institute of Energy, Environmental Economy 3, a member of Chinese climate delegation since 2001, served on the World Bank High-Level Commission on Carbon Price. He's central to the design of China's national ETS. He brings deep policy design expertise on carbon pricing and China's energy transition. And our third panelist is Dr. Ashwini Swain. He's the Director Indian Program at Regulatory Assistance Project, RAP. He is a political scientist focused on the political economy of electricity, regulatory governance, and subnational preparedness of energy transition. Previously, he sit at the Sustainable Future Collaborative and also under the Center for Policy Research. He brings a regulator-facing on-the-ground view of how India is balancing reliability, affordability, and decarbonization. So welcome our three panelists. Thank you for this dialogue. So I think I can kick off this conversation with one shared open question. So the question actually is, the 2026 energy shock has hit Asia harder than any other region. From where you sit, how is the shock landing on ground? What is the single most consequential policy decision your country or the region you work has made either before or during the crisis to reduce and manage the impacts? So I would like to start with Joyashree, Professor Joyashree.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much and for your introduction. And but you pronounced my name so well, I can't tell you. So thank you. When I was sitting in Southeast Asia as I was observing the situation, and I was trying to frame the problem through the theory of economics of disaster. By typology of the energy shock, we can say that this came as an indirect impact of the man-made disaster through war in West Asia. So shock was actually, it was interesting to see landing in the textbook style. It came as pain for people everywhere, but more so in Asia, where import dependence for crude oil, gas, and petroleum products on West Asia is very high, almost more than 50%. And the continent houses more than half of the world population. So impact is going to be anyway very high. Now, the whole thing came that, okay, the demand was there, but then supply was less, right? And it was very uncertain and it was declining. So the distributional impact is always very unequal in a disaster with more sufferings for vulnerable people. So it was not different here also. The direct impact could be observed through everyday changing pump price in every petrol pumps, and then oil infrastructure loss induced impact, which we are not yet seeing, will have a very long-term supply disruptions, which is yet to come, and with its impact on other economic sectors also. For example, for industries, and we are already seeing what is happening in the fertilizer industry supply chain. So the economic impact of disasters are always we consider as opposite to any investment project. So basically, if we look into the counterfactual scenario, then we can say that had this war been not there, then the money could have been invested in making the just transition faster in the region, but which is now lost due to the macroeconomic effects, right? So macroeconomic effects are like, say, in this region, it has become like the increased national indebtedness, adverse impact on balance of payment, GDP loss in the region, which is in the first quarter stands at almost 0.3% to 4% in the region, higher for the poor economies with higher import dependence and low commercial reserves. of oil. Now, 90% of oil use in the transport sector. So we can see that it was very logical that majority of the policy focus in the region has been for the transport sector or mobility restriction, right? So in the countries in the region adopted, I'm just saying the broad ones. So energy saving through demand reduction policies, because demand need to go down given the supply shortages. So like work from home, use of public transport, car-free days, car rotation, eco-driving, efficient driving, restricting the speed limits, restrictions on public officials' travels, all were imposed in multiple countries. The fiscal policies were mostly in terms of the cash subsidy and sometimes to the public utility vehicles, relief package for the social protection for the vulnerable section of population. But one other thing also happened, that the individuals and households shifted very quickly to purchase electric cooking appliances in the whole region. But I would say that this happened mostly from the middle income to the higher income groups, not to the lower income groups. So there lies the difference in the affordability. So the other thing happened at the national scale was the national refining capacity enhanced in different countries. So there has been increase in electrification and also biofuel use. So these are mostly which we could see what happened with the first shock that we have observed for past months.
Thank you, Professor Joyashree. So for this insight about the impact of this crisis in the different aspects of the economy and also people's life. So then, Professor Duan, what's your opinion?
Yes, thank you for your introduction. Speaking of the most direct and significant impacts of this crisis on China, like other countries, I think it is a rise in fuel prices. Although among the world's major energy importing nations, China has been one of the least affected by the current crisis, with no disruption to domestic fuel supply. We still felt the direct impact of rising fuel prices since the outbreak of the conflict in February. China has implemented 6 rounds of oil price adjustment based on its established fuel pricing mechanism. Among those, 5 resulted in price increases and 1 resulted in decrease. And the overall increase is about 30%. However, this is the result of government intervention in oil price. Without the government intervention, the increase would have been around 46%. Speaking of the most important decisions that China has taken to effectively mitigate the crisis, the impacts of the crisis on China, I would highlight the following 2. The first is the long-standing support for the new energy vehicles industry. And second, keeping the power system both low carbon and resilient. But if you ask me to choose only one, I would say it would be China's sustained support for electric vehicle technology research, industrial development, and deployment over the past 2 decades. This support has been dynamically adjusted to address different key barriers at different stages. In the early stages, the focus was on encouraging research and development. In the middle term, so support included large-scale pilots in selected areas and sectors, for example, in the public transportation sector, as well as incentives like purchase subsidies, exemption from the vehicle purchase tax, and a very important policy in China, unrestricted driving privileges for electric vehicle bearers. More recently, the government has phased out purchase subsidies while maintaining other supportive policies. And this has also created a better condition for the government has also try to create a better condition for electric vehicle usage, such as installing a sufficient number of public charging stations and allowing individuals to install chargers in their own parking slots. I will share a few figures with you to understand the effects of this policy. By the end of 2025, the number of new electric vehicles in China, including battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, reached about 44 million. So this account for about 12% of the China's total vehicle fleet. Among them, the number of battery electric vehicles was about 30 million. China's new energy electric vehicle fleet represent about around 60% of the global electric vehicle fleet. In 2024 and 2026, the penetration rates of new energy passenger vehicles in China were about 46 and 54% respectively. So considering China's current annual fuel consumption of gasoline-powered vehicles and the refined product yield of China's domestic oil-producing industry, the existing fleet of over 40 million new energy vehicles in China can reduce the country's annual crude oil consumption by 50 million tons. In 2025, China imported 580 million tons of crude oil, of which about 240 million tons came from the Middle East. So you can do the very simple calculation. So basically, the reduced crude oil import caused by a new electric vehicle is about 10% of China's total annual oil import, and about 20% of oil import from the Middle East. I think the conclusion is very, very clear. So the penetration of electric vehicles have helped China very effectively in addressing the negative impact of the crisis. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Duan. Your side on how China has responded this kind of crisis with the policy that have been taken over the past years for the vehicle electrification. So that's a good insight. So then next panelist, Ashwini.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So from India perspective, as you know, India is heavily dependent on oil and gas imports. About 85 to 90% of India's oil requirement is imported. And a significant part of that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. About 40% of oil, two-thirds of LNG, and about 90% of LPG comes through the route. So in the route has affected energy supply significantly. So first of the impact felt was in LPG shortage, LPG supply disruptions. So this is LPG has been promoted as the main cooking fuel in India, both for residential as well as commercial use. So the first impact was in the LPG supply shortage, and government also had to increase the price for LPG. And the impact has been manifold here. So households are struggling despite formalization of LPG supply. A significant portion of population still access LPG through informal channels, and the prices there increased by 4 times, 5 times, affecting, as Professor Roy pointed out, the bottom of the society who are like informal migrant laborers in urban areas. They were affected most. And on the other side, small restaurants, eateries who were dependent on LPG for cooking, many of them have gone out of business. So that's on one side. LNG supply reduction has resulted in rationing for industrial supply, gas supply. So even though India has reduced dependency on gas in industrial processes, but there is industries like steel and fertilizer, they significantly depend on gas. So the rationing has meant implications for industrial productivity and competitiveness, which is yet to be seen in numbers, for example. And the third side, on the oil side, on petrol and diesel prices. So initially, government tried to control the price with taking some adjustment to the excise duty. But eventually, in middle of the May, India opened up to price adjustment, and in last 2 weeks we have seen three increases in prices in the range up to totaling up to 8% on petrol and diesel and CNG prices. So this is what is happening. The larger implications of this disruption is yet to be seen. The other thing we must remember also, 30% of India's fertilizer supplies comes to Strait of Hormuz. So there is already concern about what will happen to fertilizer availability and prices. However, the government maintains that we have a significant reserve and we are diversifying. So the energy security is not at risk. And as soon as the war is ended, so we'll be back to normalcy. I'll take a minute to talk about the crisis. And this is not the first time India is facing this kind of crisis. So we had the great 1970s oil crisis, which affected the region equally. So if we look at then India did a strategic shift from oil to coal as India was industrializing at that starting industrialization. India focused on more coal-based industrialization than oil. So consequently, right now, coal is the dominant primary energy source in India. And also 1970s energy crisis laid the foundations for clean energy innovation and also energy efficiency measures, so which are maturing now. And similarly, India has gone through a series of sanctions between the last 10, 15 years. So be it sanctions on Iranian oil in 2010s or sanction on Russian oil recently. So, and in response, India has diversified its import base. So what I'm trying to say is in the 2026 energy crisis, India's choices are different. So what it meant from the shift from oil to coal in 1970s case, in the current case, the choice is to shift towards more electrification. And there we have renewable energy, which offers more localization and therefore better energy security. Similarly, on the oil front, diversification is a strategy and which India has been following, but that's not sufficient. So we need to shift more towards diversified energy sources like clean energy sources. And as rightly pointed out, transport is the main user of oil, and particularly so in India. And there's a great opportunity to electrify transport, and that's how secure energy access. I'll stop here and we'll take up further questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwini. So for your point about the Indians' actions in response to this kind of crisis, through the long-term electrification and also diversification, work over the past years. So I think we'll follow up with that, for specific questions, how that will happen. So I think next we will thank you for this the panelists for your set at the the kickoff question. So I think we can move the this kind of general broad context discussion to specific national policies. So I will start again first with Joyashree, Professor Joyashree. So I know much of your work, including your recent contribution on the demand side energy management and on equity in mitigation pathway, has shown that there are options for climate actions that can be consistent with a high level of well-being, even in resourcing constrained setting. So the 2026 shock is forcing government to make demand-side decision on how to reduce oil and gas use in real time. The question is how do the impact of these rapidly implemented actions affect disadvantaged workers and households? And what does your research suggest about the way the same groups won't be affected by considered gradual just energy transition that achieve the same reduction? And are there lessons from the research that government could apply to manage the shortage they face now more equitably and to prepare for future crises? So, Professor Joyashree?
Yeah, thank you. So before I answer your question, just following on Ashwini's statements, I'll just add two more observations. So in 70s and 80s, when India faced the crisis, so they shifted to more digging out of their own domestic oil. So there was a huge offshore drilling and onshore drilling also. But that has actually exhausted many of its domestic resources. So this time the problem is a little bit different than how it was handled last time. And a second thing is that very interestingly, which we usually do not say so much, but then in the peri-urban areas in the cities and in the villages, there are many electric three-wheelers for many years now, say around 10, 12, more than 15 years maybe now. So I would say that this oil crisis did not affect many of them because of the electric mobility available there. Just I'll stop there, and there are many more things which we can say. But reflecting on what your questions are, I would just reflect on two important lessons that I have learned over these years through my research and also global research that we have been doing with many teams. So one is that with historical empirical evidence over more than a century from all over the regions globally, we could show continuous energy efficiency improvement in end-use sectors like energy efficiency improvement in industries, transport, buildings is a win-win option. We concluded that energy efficiency is a necessary condition for national energy security and global energy security as well. So it has helped the countries and sectors to increase their productivity of each energy input used. Now, compared to 70s, we can produce an industrial product with, 1/5 of energy which used to produce in 1970s. So it has happened through technological progress, national scale fuel price policies, innovation in granular technologies, new business models, so social innovations, non-price incentives, and human capacity development for implementation. I would say that in many, many countries, energy efficiency is part of the curriculum of many engineering and economics and environmental economics curriculum also. So there is continuous education, knowledge dissemination, and awareness building is happening, and you are creating human capacity. So where this has been done and the institutions have been set up, it has really successfully reduced their energy dependence of the industries also. Indian manufacturing have, gained a lot through this, but there is no contestation on this evidence. However, some argue that there is possibility of rebound effect, but numbers show it is welfare enhancing in developing countries, even if there is rebound, where there is still unsatiated demand, because you can meet the demand faster even with energy efficiency and even if there is rebound effect. So otherwise, rebound effect is always less than one, leaving enough productivity gain to enhance virtual fuel supply at a cost we have estimated recently, which are cheaper than even the energy supply from renewables or non-renewable energy sources. So besides energy efficiency, many other solutions like the load shifting or demand side solutions in different sectors can be accelerated by appropriate investment in building design, city scale planning, transport infrastructure. For that matter, we have actually identified 61 such solutions across different sectors in the last IPCC report of sixth cycle. So what we have seen is that, long-lived industrial product design, circularity compatible design of manufacturing products, and many more, these are actually creating more new economic growth, enhance human well-being through better health outcome, thermal comfort with much less energy import bill, with economy-wide job creation possibilities. So basically, those countries who have adopted energy efficiency, that has secured their economy to a large extent. If we see, had there been no energy efficiency, what would have been there? There would have been even more impact. Now, the second thing I would say, we need to, move away from ad hoc policies to strategic planning for energy system design to build resilience. So with renewable energy penetration, our research shows we need national context-based, customized, spatial scale models with high resolution to prepare strategic energy supply sector planning. Based on our model results for energy sources like solar and wind, we could demonstrate how spatial planning, integration of demand-side solutions with supply-side solution can enhance even affordability of the energy service at consumer end in this region. We are developing country by country national scale models and even subnational scale models, so that these are open source models, so they can help anyone for trying out their hands on the policy alternatives. We see that through demand-side solution integration, countries can actually reduce financial mobilization pressure on themselves and enhance affordability and create jobs with multiple co-benefits. So countries in the region actually are, we have seen, are including demand-side solutions in their nationally determined contribution. But our study shows there is still many untapped potential for raising this ambition with national benefits. Energy efficiency is showing up in most of the countries' NDCs now in the region, but still there are many more which can be implemented, like the demand side shift and like the load management through digital technologies and all. Such measures should not be looked into as an emergency measure, but we need to mainstream them into policies and action and to build the resilience for the energy systems to absorb the shocks.
Thank you, Professor. So from your perspective, I hear that energy efficiency, renewable energy development, and will play very important to reduce the price and also build the resilience of the energy system. And they also said that with this kind of measures, that some new jobs could be created, right, to for some workers, maybe that will be a good aspect of just energy transition. So we can think about. I also hear that you mentioned policy analysis, data modeling analysis will play a very important role for this kind of policy development. So we can hear more about that direction later. Thank you. And then the next question go to Professor Duan Maosheng. So, China's national ETS is still maturing. So the country is simultaneously managing energy security, industry competitiveness, and the long-term climate goals. How is the current shock shaping the trajectory or carbon pricing in China? Does it accelerate the case for stronger price signal, or does it create pressure to slow the system evolution? And looking beyond China, what role do you see for international carbon market, including, under Article 6, in helping the rest of the global south prepare for and also respond to the shock like this crisis? Professor Duan?
Yes, thank you for your questions. Honestly, I don't believe that the current crisis will have a direct and immediate impact on China's national emissions trading system development, particularly on the carbon price. However, I think significant indirect impacts are certainly present, and I believe they will become visible in the future. As discussed earlier, this crisis has shown that through the low carbon transition of China's energy system, especially transportation sector, and decarbonization of the China's power system while maintaining security, China has greatly reduced the negative impacts of the crisis. Since past practices have proven to be correct, I'm confident that China will continue to move forward along this path with even greater determination. So China's national emissions trading system currently covers high emission sectors such as the power generation and steel, aluminum smelting, and cement clinker, and does not include the transportation sector. Therefore, in the near to medium term, its future development will not have a direct impact on the promotion of electric vehicles. However, in future rulemaking, on the other hand, I think the ETS authority will continue to promote emission reduction in relevant sectors by raising carbon prices and by introducing allowance auction. On the other hand, I also think the ETS authority will certainly continue to protect the coal-fired and gas-fired power generation units that are very crucial to ensure China's security of the power system. I think they will do so by adopting appropriate measures such as free allowance allocation methods without imposing significant cost pressure on those power units. Let me share a few figures. So by the end of 2025, China's installed power generation capacity reached 3.9 billion kilowatts. So of which non-fossil energy power generation capacity reached as high as 2.4 billion kilowatts. So accounting for 62% of the total installed capacity. In terms of power generation, non-fossil energy generated 4.5 trillion kilowatt hours, raising its share in the total power generation to 43%. So this is an increase of 3.7% percent points over the previous year. The share of coal-fired power generation fell to about 51%. So I think the trend is very clear in terms of coal-fired power units. So the capacity has increased while the generation has decreased. I think that is very clear. So in 2025, the incremental electricity generated from wind, solar, and biomass power accounted for 97% of total increase in China's electricity consumption. So with all those achievements in decarbonizing China's electric sector, I think we should never underestimate the crucial role of coal power units in China. So from this is about China. From an international perspective, I think the lesson from this crisis is very clear. So we must accelerate the decarbonization of the energy system to reduce reliance on external fossil fuels. So this transition needs to be tailored to local conditions, meaning that we should vigorously develop a high, both grid connected and distributed renewable energy generation. While we know that decarbonizing the energy system requires massive new investment, and this is precisely where international carbon market include the market established under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement can help. Countries in need can introduce the necessary technologies and equipment such as wind power, solar PV, energy storage facilities, and electric vehicles. They can then generate revenues by selling the carbon emission reduction achieved through those low carbon assets to countries that need those credits. What we should mention is a cooperative approach established under the Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. So this approach gives a lot of flexibilities to the host countries. It allows them to autonomously determine which sector, which specific modalities they wish to use in terms of the cooperation with others in carbon mitigation. And we have already witnessed some successful cases. I hope those countries they need can really fully utilize the market established and also the flexibility offered by the Paris Agreement. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your excellent insight on those the relationship between carbon market and also energy security. As far as I understand, so your point is that both can go hand in hand, and the problem is how to design the policy according to different situation on different countries. So I think in China's experience could be also very helpful for other countries to learn. So thank you. So then our next panelist. So Ashwini. So India's response has included expanding coal to meet summer demand, even though it pushed ambitious renewable target as you just mentioned, and much of the actual delivery sit at the state level rather than with the central government. So my question is that from a political economic standpoint, how do state level regulators and distribution companies actually navigate that tension in practice? And what does just transition looks like when it has to be negotiated state by state between actors with very, very different incentives and different situations rather than kind of top-down design?
Thank you. To start with, to clarify, India's response to the global energy crisis at present is much more focused on managing the supply disruption and the price implications. I don't think India has any strategic response towards building energy security or so. So now coming to the point about expanding coal consumption, yes, current coal-fired power generation has increased marginally compared to last year. I would put It's largely because last year's summer temperature was much more favorable. This year, there's a heat wave and the demand has increased significantly. That is primarily the reason why coal-fired consumption is increasing in current months. But also, not to ignore that, we have a small gas-fired generation in electricity, which has disrupted, and that might have contributed to it. But the major factor for coal increase in coal consumption is the heat wave, the temperature rise in this summer. So, even though India hasn't any war-specific response, but there are a bunch of things happening in Indian power sector which may get accelerated with the current energy crisis. So on the supply side, that has been at least initial conversation around a lot of innovations around regulatory and market reforms. So the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, which is responsible for promotion of renewable energy, of course, they have been trying to create a level playing field for modern renewable energy. So India's electricity sector institutions are designed for conventional energy sources like coal and large hydro. They you need more innovations to for better RE integration. So recently, MNRE has launched a couple of pilot projects which would allow better RE integration. So we are basically seeing a group of financially settled contracts in electricity market. So like there's a pilot for on contract for different agreements, and we are also promoting virtual power purchase agreements for corporate consumers particularly. On the other side, federal regulator has come up with a discussion paper on capacity market, so which would bring in more innovation in the electricity market and allow and holds the promise of better RE integration. So that's on the supply side. We're doing a lot of innovations, but these are largely at pilot stage or conceptual stage. We'll see how it proceeds sooner. Then on the demand side, as it was pointed out, and in India particularly, the demand is a pickier demand, electricity demand. So we have different peaks across the country. So there has been conversation, and just to put it in context, if you look at this year, India's peak demand touched 270 gigawatt, so which is roughly close to 7-8% higher compared to last year. So there has been significant discussion around how to bring in demand flexibility, how to flatten the demand curves, how to reduce small peak demands, small duration peak demands. So there has been a series of regulations at the state level. The federal regulator seems to be working on model regulation, so which will help significantly in ensuring better energy access and reducing the cost of energy access. So these two sides should further accelerate with the current energy crisis scenario. Then the two other things which are happening is, of course, we know about the various electrification measures happening, particularly transport makes a great sense, but also industrial processes. Another great opportunity is industrial heat processes, particularly low and medium heat processes, which could be electrified easily. So that creates an opportunity which has to be prioritized. Then finally, in India, affordability has been a long-standing question. So it's a political issue as well. So you'll see recently state governments, subnational governments in India have been providing significant universal subsidies, allowing X amount of kilowatt hours to household consumers particularly. That is on rise over years. So recently we had a series of state assembly elections, and one of the new governments announced 200 kilowatt hours per month free electricity to households. So it has a consequence on financial viability of the sector, which is a negative consequence. But on the positive side, as the world is moving towards energy crisis, these sort of universal subsidies allow households or citizens to access some basic energy, and which reduces the price shock on the households to some extent. But this is a debatable, controversial subject. The political economy of subsidies is many layered. How that is managed is complicated. Uh, so I think particularly the efforts on supply side, demand side, and electrification side should be accelerated in the current crisis situation. It should create more impetus for it rather than any barrier. And now coming to your last question, how does the just transition look like in the Indian political economy context where it has to be negotiated state by state? In a way, you answered the question. So India, because of its diversity, cannot have a single top-down approach to just transition. It has to be negotiated at state level. It has to be between multiple stakeholders with different incentive structure. So, but what I see the opportunity here, because Indian states are clustered in different ways. If you look at the eastern and central Indian states, they hold coal reserves and the mineral reserves, and the mineral-based industries are concentrated in those areas. But then other major manufacturing happening on the western coast, western and southern side of the country. So in that case, there is an opportunity for regionally focused energy transition or just transition. So where you look not the states as individually, but states as a cluster, as a region. So what could be the just transition part for a plan for Eastern Indian states? Given their mineral base, how can they transition? Or for the states on the west, for their better connectivity to Europe and other global markets, as well as their current manufacturing base, how can they decarbonize? So this could be different approaches, and I think there is a great opportunity looking at the regional level. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashwini. So I think your point is very clear. So I think in the process of just energy transition, both the central government and the state government play the key role. Just the situation in China, like the situation in China, so different regions have different situations. So they have their own, challenge need to be deal with. But meanwhile, I think the central government need to provide some level playing policies to such kind of to support such kind of transition, especially for those disadvantaged regions. Thank you very much. I think because of time limits, so we need to get to the kind of synthesis questions. So this question to three of you. If you have to leave the audience, including policymakers, founders, watching from outside Asia, with one message about what advancing energy just transition looks like when the world is in crisis, what would it be? So I think your answer should be very concrete, just one priority, one on risk or risk, just in 90%. No, sorry, 90 seconds. Thank you. So I think this time I should go first with Ashwini. 19 minutes. 90 seconds.
90 seconds. Thank you. So I think it's very clear that this current crisis has created strong imperatives for moving towards clean energy, doing more electrification. So that is the focus, and that should happen. So we also need to think about the systems and the infrastructure which support this value chain, supply chain, which would be required for more RE penetration, or institutional support required for that. So, our next energy transition strategy should try to balance between targets for electrification, RE integration with creating right regulatory and policy support, institutional support, and also creating the necessary value chain, supply chain for it.
Thank you, Professor Duan.
Yeah, my message is we should actively advance the decarbonization of the energy system in a way that suits each country's actual needs, including through distributed renewable energy generation. I think this approach will not only reduce overall reliance on external fossil fuel, thereby enhancing national energy security, but also improve the well-being of the low-income populations who are most vulnerable to energy crisis. By doing so, we can ensure that low carbon energy access, and energy security can go hand in hand, ultimately get support from all sectors for the low carbon transition of the energy system. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Duan's multi-way, suggestion. So then lastly, so Joyashree.
Thank you. I might take a little more than 90 seconds, but just forgive me for that, but I'm the last one, so that can be helpful. So what I would say is that I would not generalize across all crises, but in the current crisis, if I use a definition for my, ease of explanation, then I'll be using a minimalist approach by defining just transition as achieving zero emission while closing the gap in affordable access to energy services. If I use this definition, I would say that this crisis has enhanced affordability gap. So that way the just transition is challenged. But zero emission goal, I don't think it will be impacted because a whole region is geared towards that. So I do not see the backtracking of that. And on the affordability gap, I'll just say that where from the money will come for these, for providing the social protection. I'll just give one example. When I was listening to China's ETS, then I was thinking that India had something like that, which had a perform, achieve, and trade. And at the same time, there was another policy which was about coal cess. Cess is like a tax, but then it has a definition that it has to go back to that sector itself. So coal cess created a national clean energy fund, a huge fund. So if it is a carbon tax kind of thing, then the theoretical controversy is that if it is not reverted back within the economy, then it creates imbalance, right? So I was thinking that looking at this crisis, the National Clean Energy Fund, which was created by the coal tax, can perfectly fund this kind of just transition crisis for social protection. And so this can become the carbon market, carbon price can create this new money, which can come back within the economy to provide justice. So with these words, I would say that we should really think in terms of all these new instruments.
Thank you. I think time almost up. So, but still we have a question in the box. So the question is, when crisis hit, we see that clean energy investment drop first. How can the clean energy transition be protected while government scramble for short-term supply? So I think Ashwini already mentioned some actions in situation in India. So, Dr. Ashwini, so could you just 1 minute to respond to that question, if possible?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, often energy crises are linked with financial crisis, which creates general conditions, general challenges for investment. But in the current context, if you're asking about while the government is scrambling for shortage in supply, I think one of the advantages of clean energy is it can come up much faster. So that helps in addressing the shortages quicker. So, as Professor Roy pointed out, the momentum for clean energy has already been achieved. So, I don't think there will be any shift from that. I mean, we're not going back. So, and to me, clean energy offers opportunity for faster response. So, therefore, it should rather be prioritized and used as a solution for addressing this sort of shortages.
Thank you for your answers. I think we need to wrap up this seminar. So I would like to thank every panelist and also audience. And meanwhile, so we would like to invite all the policymakers, experts, and also maybe researchers to become our research members and follow research. And I think yes, okay. So you will find the link or sign up link and the newsletter link in the chat box. That already posted. So this information, this seminar recording will be also shared. So if you have chance, you can get back to watch this. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you to next quarterly webinar. Thank you. Bye.